green.
Honey,
Okay, cool. Hi, guys.
hello.
I don't know.
Oh.
He does whatever he's gonna do. I won't look at it. So, okay. Anyway, hi.
Hi.
Tonight we're gonna be studying Genesis 15 through 17.
Gosh, I'm getting quiet.
It's okay. Have a good day.
Yes.
Yes.
Ready.
Okay, we're ready.
Yeah.
Awesome. Piper's handing out these papers. Amazing.
Danke schön. Huh? My hand, it just slipped right through my hand.
I made my thing really high, but I don't actually want it that high. The longer I'm like standing, I'm like, nope.
Just don't step back and fall.
Well, I don't mind that. I had it.
Way up yonder. You don't
See, for
mind
Jason, I
your
thought this would be
heel
neat.
on it?
No,
Oh,
I won't hit my heel on it.
Oh, okay.
Anyway. But we are live, so we can actually start.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and pray, and then we can just dive into it, because otherwise we'll just keep doing whatever this is for another 10 minutes. Okay. God, thank you so much for today. Thank you for the pizza that we got from Russell's, and thank you for fellowship and just for everyone who's here. God, thank you for what all you want us to learn tonight, and just open all of our hearts to hear that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay. You ever like notice like if you, huh? Oh yeah, that was Brandon. He picked a really great picture. Who is responsible?
They
Is
are.
the title. Yeah. See, I promise we're not going back to Genesis. You know, in the very beginning of Genesis, we are going to be in 15 through 17, but it just made sense. You ever like you're studying, like you're going to teach something, or you're going to talk to somebody about something, or whatever. You're just reading your Bible, just to read your Bible. And you're like slowly getting more and more convicted. It's like, that's kind of how this is for me. I don't know. I thought it was really good. So hopefully you guys will think it's good. And if not, that's kind of a personal problem. But so we're just going to start off in Genesis 15, verse 1. And Brandon is, he's going to be on the ball all night and do amazing. And if he doesn't, don't anybody tell him, please. Okay, so everybody remembers what happened in Genesis 14? Okay, really easy. There's like these little titles that they put in at the beginning of things. So it says Abram rescues Lot, and then Lot went back to Sodom and Gomorrah, and then Abram was blessed by Melchizedek. Okay, so does everybody remember what Abraham's, I almost say Abraham every time, what his blessing was from God, like his call, the call of Abraham, which was in Genesis 12. Sorry? Okay. Okay, cool. I'll just read it really quickly. So you don't have to flip to it, but it was in Genesis 12, and it says, now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Okay. And then the next sentence is, so Abram went. Anyway. So that's kind of like the prelude to this. Okay, so in Genesis 15, verse 1, it says, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, for I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer, didn't bother to learn the pronunciation of his name, of Damascus. Okay, so the first note I have here is fear not, okay? Little air quotations, fear not. Abram was already starting Like, you start questioning things. You start, like, God's telling you not to fear. It's probably because you're already scared. You're already fearing things. Okay, so Abram was already slipping. He's already starting to be like, is this going to actually happen? How is this actually going to happen? I don't have a child. Clearly, I'm getting up there. And I have notes. He's starting to be fearful about who is responsible for this great promise. And kind of the thing that I just kept seeing again and again and again through these 3 chapters was like, who is responsible for God's promises? Like, who's responsible to carry them out? Who's responsible to do them? Who are the responsible parties in this contract or covenant? So that's in verse 1 and 2. In verse 3, Abram said, "Behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, this man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir." So, the note that I found for Eleazar, however you say his name, of Damascus, was that basically people think that he's a servant, and he was like the same trusted servant who's part of Abram's household. This is what they think. I don't know if it's true. Who later Abram sent to find a wife for Isaac. So that's the only note on him. But he would technically have been part of his household, so that's why he said him. The other thing that I just thought was kind of interesting was, like, my thought process is, why couldn't Lot just inherit all his stuff? Like, why didn't he think about Lot? Because I just thought he was going to say Lot. I've read it a bunch of times and never noticed the Eleazar of Damascus. But for Lot, I put down 2 notes, and one was that God had already promised Abram that he was going to make of him a great nation. Like, so it had to be through him. And the second point was that God had already separated Lot from the promise, and his children don't actually rejoin that promise until Ruth marries Boaz, which is like a couple generations later, which ironically is through like Moab, which is through Lot's relationship with his daughter, and that's just a whole different chapter, but we're not getting into that. But anyway, so that's why Lot couldn't really inherit, not because of the daughter thing, but like because he was separated for a different purpose. Anyway, so I stopped in 4. Okay, so the other thing about that is that God is like he's asking, how is this going to come about? He's starting to ponder this. He's not even starting because God said, do not fear. So he's already been pondering. He's at the point of fear now, that irrationalization is like gotten pretty high. So now he's like, okay, it's got to be a member of my household. So maybe it'll be Eleazar or whatever his name is. Anyway, and God says, no, it's not going to be him. It's going to be your very own son. So now God's just clarifying, just so you know, it won't just be some random person in your household. It's going to be from you directly. And then in verse 5 of chapter 15, it says, "And he brought him outside and said, look toward heaven and number the stars, if you were able to number them. And then he said to him, so shall your offspring be." Just like another promise to Abram. Like, here, this is how your offspring will be. Go out there, count it. You can't count it? Okay. Confidence. Here you go. And it says, and he believed the Lord, and it was counted to him as righteousness in verse 6. Which I think that's neat just because, I don't know, his belief was counted as righteousness. In John 20:29, do you have that one? It's like your belief is counted as righteousness. It's not just God said it and then you're doing things. It's God said it, you're believing it, and so out of that you're acting out of it. In John 20:29, it says, have you believed because you have seen me? Consider those who have not seen and yet believed. I always used to take that verse, and that was like my verse. Like, it didn't matter what anybody said about God or anything, because just because growing up I didn't see miracles or people speaking in tongues or different things like that. I was like, God exists, and it doesn't matter, because guess what? The Bible says, even though I haven't seen it, I'm blessed because I believe it, whatever. And anyway, more proof for my little beliefs back then is right here, where it says, like, it was counted to him as righteousness that he believed. Okay, so chapter 15, verse 7. It says, and he said to him, let's God talking to him again. I'm the Lord who brought you out from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. But he said, but, just kind of, for context, kind of negates what was said before it. So, like, it's like God said something again, and then he's just like, but. It's crazy. Anyway. But he said, O Lord God, how am I to know that I shall possess it? And he said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, a young pigeon, and a young pigeon. And he brought them all these and cut them in half and laid each half over against the other. So, some kind of thing. I could have pulled up a picture for that, but I don't want to. But he did not cut the birds in half. So has anybody ever, I stopped on 11, I put my finger there. Has anybody ever wondered if, this is just my thought, but has anybody ever wondered if sometime when you told your parents something that maybe was true or wasn't true, or you were just kind of exaggerating toward them, they could get a little dramatic back toward you, kind of to make a point, you see a little kid being like, my life is horrible, and parents no, it's not, it's crazy. Anyway, I have here for these verses, right, that we're reading, we're on verse 11, that God will let it get a little dramatic to teach you something. Just because I just think this is interesting. Okay, so in verse 11, this is God. He just said, how am I to know this is going to happen? After God just said, I am the God who brought you out of all this stuff, and I'm going to give you all this. And he's like, but how am I really going to know? And God's like, okay. So in verse 11, when the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, that little pile of meat he had going, Abram drove them away, and as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and behold, a dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. Then the Lord said to Abram, I feel like this is when that thundering voice, starts. Know for certain, that's serious, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be affected for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterwards they shall come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go into to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. And they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. When the sun had gone down, and it was dark, behold, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch passed through these places. And on that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring I will give this land. From the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Cadmonites, the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Rephaim, the Amorites and the Canaanites, the Gishites and the Jebusites. He's getting all of it. Okay. You say it fast, it's just over. It's like Jason said, you just end up spitting, and then it's and we're done. All right, end of that chapter. Okay, so don't really understand the smoking pot or the fire torch, but I just picture it floating. The sky got dark. Everything's kind of it's a great and dreadful darkness fell upon him, and smoking pots and stuff are going around, and God's no, for certain. It's okay, God got a little dramatic, but it's, I don't know, it's because we start to ask these questions even though he's already answered them, and we just keep asking them. I think it's kind of cool that sometimes God will, instead of just being quiet and letting us ponder ourselves for a while, sometimes he'll just shake us up a little bit and be listen, I said. Anyway. Yeah.
Back in that day, when people made covenants, wasn't it traditional that they would have the sacrifices and split the sacrifices, and then each party to the covenant would walk through the flaming sacrifices or whatever to seal the covenant? I think that was the tradition back then.
Okay.
I think.
So why didn't he walk through it? I like it.
Because covenants were usually between two people. And I'm going to Google it while
Okay.
So each party would walk through it, but God didn't have to walk through it.
Yeah. I like that. He's like, I'll send my torch through it. Or maybe that's why there was two things. So you'd be like, you're one of, I'm one of these. You don't have to walk through the pile of meat. Who knows? Okay, Tara's gonna Google that. All right. So in chapter 16, I really like that all the little sections. I don't know what kind of Bibles you all have. I have ESV, but it says like the different like descriptions of the chapters. And one time I was like reading and I read that that's like that was like from the actual text at one point. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I read. These aren't just things that the people from ESV were like, this chapter's about this, so I'm just gonna scribble down a little note and say that that's what it's about. I think that's kind of neat, but only because like the next chapter is like Sarah and Hagar. Like he could have titled it a lot of other things, but he decided this is a good point to stop and say, find out what happens in this dramatic chapter of the Bible. Yes. Sarai and Hagar. The birth of Ishmael in 16. Ooh, that's interesting. I love it. We're talking about the Bible. Yep. That's cool. Okay. So, we're in the first verse. Guys. Yeah, go ahead.
This is just one that I found. So it's talking about in Zedekiah that they're talking about cutting covenants. And it says in both of these accounts we read that at least one animal was killed, cut into two pieces, and then someone passed between the divided pieces. So that was they like sealed covenants.
So, like, he stacked the pieces up, though, and then neither one of them passed between it. In this account.
Oh, did he stack them?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just a slightly different way.
It says this
Go ahead.
flaming torch passed between the pieces.
Oh, between the pieces? See, I was always thinking that they were.
So, well, you're right, it did say stacked up.
But it's
apparently
still.
Yeah, somehow I know, we know God can do
But I
anything.
think the point you're making that maybe if you put it all together is, and it goes back, it was God was making the covenant, right? Not,
Mhm.
you know, like two people making a covenant with each other. Abraham, he had nothing to
Yeah.
offer, right?
He was asleep.
Something from each party.
Yeah. Where does it say it in the Bible? Like, God could swear by no one greater than himself. So, like, I don't need your puny promises. I don't know. That is pretty cool. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay. So, in chapter 16, verse 1, it says, Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, Behold now, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. Okay, so here we are. One more time, just kind of like sliding into this like thing of questioning it. I love how she says, it may be that I shall obtain children by her. Like first Abram was like, maybe I'm not even going to have kids. Maybe one of my servants is going to be the descendants from my household, whatever. And like maybe I'm not going to be the one who's doing this. Like God said he's going to do it, and he said he's responsible. He's going to do this miracle, this amazing thing. But maybe it's not going to be me. Maybe it's going to be my servant. And now that God's like confirmed to him, it is going to be your kid. And I'm assuming he, pillow talk, whatever. He told his wife. Now she's sitting here thinking, I don't know. Maybe there's a timeline that they're thinking he's only going to be able to have kids for this long. I don't know what was going on for her. But at this point, now she's like, but maybe it's not me. Maybe I'm not the vessel that God is going to use for his seed. Maybe I'm holding the process up and I just need to give him my servant. Like, I don't know. There's just more. I have notes here that say, like, it kind of reminds me of, like, the did God really say thing, like, from Satan just talking to Eve. Like, did God really say that? Like, it may be that God doesn't want this like marriage that he put together to be where it comes from. Maybe he actually wants it to be from this extramarital thing. I don't know.
Maybe
It's
he misunderstood what he was telling you.
exactly. Yeah. So first it's like it's from God, and there was no misunderstanding. And then Abram, and there's like this misunderstanding. So God clears that up, and now Sarai is over here like just goes down, trickling down through everyone. Okay, what were you saying? Okay. Okay. All right. So verses 3-6 then, it says, so Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. And he went in to Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And Sarai said to Abram, may the wrong done to me be done on you. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me. So I was like, you literally got all my notes, okay? Like I didn't save any of them, so read along with me. At this point, we can all see, but maybe now it's more obvious to Abram that things have gotten pretty out of hand in his household. Now he has these two women that he's married to, and one's got a kid and the other one doesn't, and there's like fighting and friction happening between these women. So who are we holding accountable or holding responsible for our own personal happiness, or for like in that situation, this is marriage that's obviously got now issues, like who are we holding responsible for that? So who is responsible? If you're not happy, who's responsible? Jordan, if you're not happy, if I'm not happy, who's actually responsible for that? So God made a promise, and Abram becomes scared that he can't fulfill it. And then God makes the promise and it makes it super clear, be certain that I will fulfill it. And then Sarai sees that she is not fulfilling it. Like she's supposed to be the one fulfilling it, even though God said it's my responsibility. I got this. Like now she's sitting here like, man, I'm just not fulfilling this. Maybe I need to bring something in. And then, you know, she might see that he's running out of time to have a kid. Who knows? All these little things, these natural things come into your senses and you start adding on to what God said. And then Sarai has this great idea that she's going to take responsibility. I think that's neat because when God gave me that, I was just like, so it's not always our job to just take responsibility of other people's responsibility? No, not really. So she decided, I will take ownership of this that nobody else is taking care of. Clearly, roll my sleeves up, because this is like, I don't know if this is a girl thing. Maybe it's a guy thing too, but like, no one else. Exactly. I'll do it myself. Yes. All right. So she has a great idea. Turns out the great idea was not a great idea. No, there's a pregnant person who I don't like particularly. She doesn't like me anymore. This wasn't a great idea. But since I took ownership of it, you'd think I would now continue taking ownership of it and be like, this was my fault. Clearly I did this. She does not. Now I'm blaming my husband because clearly he should have known better than all of this. Aren't you in charge here? I don't know. And Abram could say, yeah, I was in charge here and I allowed this to happen. But instead, we see in verse 6 that he kind of pushes it back to her. Behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please. So she literally ends her little marital argument rant that she's just like going at it. Like, yeah, I feel very convicted about this, by the way. She's like going at it toward this poor man. And she's like the Lord judge between you and me. And I don't know, that made me feel very convicted because I was just like, yeah, God will tell us who's right. And I'm like, you know what happens to people God says are dead wrong? Emphasizing the word dead. Like, I don't know. I don't know, but that's something that she should have said. I have no idea. But like, that's very, yeah. The situation, yeah.
But we can't trust him in the first place to make it happen.
Yeah, but like there it is. It's reminiscent back to the garden. Like she did it. Well, the snake did it. Well, you know, whatever. The snake's sitting here like, yeah, I did. Oh well. Enjoy, guys. Like, but we're pushing off this responsibility. So it gets pushed back onto Sarai. Ah, no, it was your responsibility all along. You're the one who said it was my job now. You took care of things. You deal with your problems, you know. And who takes responsibility? Like, who ends up taking responsibility? If we keep pushing our responsibilities off, like, who takes it? And if we claim a responsibility that's not ours and then try to push it off, who takes it? I have a really funny story that I heard once. I don't even remember who gave it, so I won't try to remember it. But it was a man and his kids and his wife, and his son was like a teenager or something like that. Not any teenagers. I once was. Basically, he came upstairs and he was going into one of his other kids' rooms to talk to them. And he sees this like towel laying across the floor. And it's clearly the teenager had left the towel there because he just took a shower. And he calls him out and he's like, man, how did this towel get here? And he's just like, I mean, you ask these silly questions. You know, that's what parents do. You ask silly questions. You know the answers. But how did this towel get here? And he's like, man, I just left it. I didn't mean to leave it. I'll get it. And he's like, no, don't get it. Don't worry about it. Could you call your mom up here? And the son's like, please don't make me do this, because he already knows, like, this is something the dad has done many times. And he's like, don't make me, no, call your mom to come up here. So he does. His mom comes up and she's just standing there. She sees the towel. So like, you already, the situation, they all know it, but for the rest of us. And he tells his son to tell his mom to pick up the towel and take it downstairs and put it in the dirty clothes, because that's where it's eventually going to end up. And the son's just like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And he's like, tell her to do it. Just get it over with and tell her to do it. And the reason he said that he practiced this with his kids growing up was because he wanted them to understand that ultimately when you say, I'm not going to take care of my responsibility, when you create an issue and then you don't want to even try to take care of it, you're basically asking someone else to take care of it. I think it's funny because God had already said, I made a promise. This is something that I'm going to take care of. And like through the steps, everyone's just like, nah, it's my responsibility. And God's like, no, it's not. It's like, it's my responsibility. And I'm just going to do it. And instead of Abram being like, no, wife, it's not actually. He's like, okay, sure. Let's just take it. And then it gets to this point where now this poor woman who was an Egyptian slave is now a wife and pregnant and doesn't like her master anymore. And it's like, who knows what happened here. But whose responsibility is it? Like, who's going to take responsibility when we don't? Who's picking up the pieces when we're just dropping them? And to be honest, it's God. Like, that's just what it comes down to, because God's like, it was mine to begin with. It's going to be mine to end with. That could sound a little convoluted with the towel analogy. But basically, God said he was going to fulfill this promise, and he's going to fulfill it regardless of the fact that people got involved and then people made it messy and then people said it was mine or it's yours or let's push it back onto. So like this whole situation comes into this head, which is in verse 6. It goes on to say, but Abram said to Sarai, behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please. And then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, in the spring on the way to Shur. So it doesn't actually say what she did to her servant, to her, sister, wife, whatever you want to call her at this point. It doesn't say, sister, wife. It doesn't say what she did to her, but the angel had to find her. Okay. She wasn't hiding behind little fern, like behind the tent, like pouting that, she wasn't quite nice to me today. She spoke harshly. Like she went and hid to get completely away from the whole situation, because obviously it's become quite toxic. So she didn't want to be there anymore. And the angel of the Lord found her, which to me is just suggestive that he had to look for her. It wasn't just, there she is. Okay. Like he's like out there, this angel out there beating the bushes trying to find this girl. I don't know. That's just kind of interesting to me. But, okay. So in verse 8 it says, and he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. We're going till 12. Okay. Return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for the multitude, And the angel of the Lord said to her, Behold, you are pregnant, and you shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen. Okay, so this is God talking to Hagar, and he's got a rebuke, and he's also got like a promise in there. Promises, which I think is kind of neat because that's just kind of how God is. He says harsh things, and then he like follows it up with like, but it's gonna be okay. Like, really, it's gonna be okay if you listen. Harsh thing. Go back to this woman that literally made you flee into the wilderness. Like, go back. It's fine. It's a little toxic seeming. The world would probably tell you if you were in a marriage and you became a sister wife, this might not be a good situation to be in. Okay, but God's a little like, to the rest of us, a little crazy sometimes. God's just like, yeah, you need to go back into that because you're not done yet. Your time isn't up. It's time for you to go back. But then he also gives her promise, and it's just like, I will surely multiply your offspring. I was trying to think of different reasons that she might have wanted to run away. One, obviously, just being, this is miserable. Time to get out of this. Like, if you've ever had a miserable job, you've definitely had that thought. Another thing is she just got pregnant, so obviously she cares about her child. She could be concerned about what's going to happen with a baby. She could be concerned about what this harsh dealing with was. Who knows? But she could be concerned about a lot of different things. But God's like promising her, I will multiply your offspring. So it's like, your kid's not going to die. You're not going to die. It's going to be okay. Go back into it. And then in Genesis 16, starting in verse 13, it goes on to say, So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, You are a God of seeing. For he said, Truly I have for she said, Truly I have seen him who looks after me. Therefore this well was called Bir Lahai-roi. Bir Lahai-roi? Okay, whatever. You all know what it says, okay? It lies between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son, who Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. Okay. Yes.
We didn't read the part in verse 12 when it talks about how bad Ishmael will be.
I did read that. I just didn't comment on it. Nope.
Oh.
Because, yeah, he's going to be alive and stuff, but he's going to be, like, so bad.
Yeah.
I know, wild like a donkey.
That is very true. Okay. Does anybody know who Ishmael's descendants were? Okay.
If it weren't for the latter part where, God tells Abraham, I would have thought for sure that the angel of the Lord that told Hagar what to do
Mhm.
was a fallen angel.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
of what became of that
Yeah.
lineage.
You like start to wonder, like,
Yeah.
it says an angel of the Lord, but this seems pretty dark. Okay, sorry. My bad, Piper. Okay. Jason would never have done this to you. So Ishmael's descendants are like present day Muslims, and pretty much everyone's against them, and they're pretty much against everybody else.
It basically does exactly what
Yeah.
the promise was.
And like,
fought against the Jews and the Christians early on.
mm-hmm. And like, forever onward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That started a long time ago.
Yeah. That's where that started.
So was that, like, a warning that, like, your son's going to be like this? Or?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd have called it a warning, maybe a statement, but
Yeah. Said he will be.
He is gonna get ample.
enjoy. Okay. Does that explain your question?
Yeah, it just seems sad that
Yeah.
you're going to be, like, you're going to be fine, and your son's going to be fine, but he's going to be, like, a terrible person or something against everyone.
Yeah. And
And,
his descendants,
yeah,
well, more what that meant anyway. But yeah.
descendants would be awful. That's not fair.
No.
Felt very cheated because obviously Isaac was the chosen one and Isaac was carrying on the promise.
Mhm.
So
little cheated. Get that root of bitterness sowed in early.
Right. I mean, what about sibling rivalry? Yeah.
Yeah, them, seeds
Yeah.
fell on.
Another Cain and Abel. Kinda, yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
one was favored and one was not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and he got, when he was older, when Isaac was born, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he didn't like it at all and caused a heck of it, and that's why they got run out
Yeah.
at that time.
Well, and
They
he's
got
like,
kind
what is he, 12 or 13 years older than
yeah,
Isaac?
yeah.
Oh, he's that much older?
So it had been a minute between these births.
That's a long time. That's right, 'cause Abraham was what, 90-something years old when she had him?
Yep.
Hmm.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments on Ishmael and his sad life?
I don't
'Kay.
remember. How old
I
was
think it comes up next.
Abraham when he had Isaac?
It'll come up to the next.
Oh, okay.
It'll be there. Okay.
Okay, I'll wait. Patiently.
Yeah, you gotta wait patiently, because otherwise, who knows? Okay. um, all right. The other thing that I thought was kind of neat was that maybe it doesn't mean anything to anybody else. I don't know, but it was neat that God told Hagar. This could be a very easy explanation. I like to think it was just God, but anyway, God told Hagar that her son was going to be named Ishmael, which means God hears. And then it says Abram named him Ishmael, which means God hears. I don't know. I like to think that God told him to name him that. But I will just say, I just can't really particularly imagine that his wife loved that. Because, like, what's that supposed to mean? I don't know. I feel like that'd be like a girl comment. Like, what exactly is that supposed to mean? God hears. But also, I like the part where even though Ishmael's going to be a horrible person, he's going to have horrible kids, everything's going to be bad from that on, but you're going to live, and he's going to live. Yeah, so, whatever. I do like the part that she says that you are a God of seeing. Truly, I have seen him who looks after me. Like, she's an Egyptian servant, and now, like, you got to know if she's Egyptian, she had other gods. She had other people she served, okay? She had a whole different existence. And now she's just like saying, you're the one who looked after me. I don't know. I think that's neat. Because if it was New Testament, we'd all be like, that's the conversion moment. That's when she became a Christian, guys. So Old Testament, I'd like to think that's her version of it. I really thought Dan was raising his hand, but he might legit be scratching. Anyway. Okay. So, we're going into chapter 17. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, we're not reading all the way till Isaac is born, so now you all know. But who's responsible for fulfilling God's promises? Like, if God says he's going to do something, who is responsible for it? Exactly, which is kind of crazy, because he's promising by himself. So he's like, I'm going to do it. And we're like, really? Are you sure? Who's going to do it? And it's like, I don't know. Just ask yourself, who said they were going to do it? Who's responsible? Okay, so in verse 1 of chapter 17. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, that I may make my covenant between me and you, and you may multiply you greatly. Then Abram fell on his face, and the Lord said, Behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. Yes, I can start saying Abraham. Okay. Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. Okay. So, from here on out, I want somebody to count how many times God said, I will. That's like Jason's thing, but I don't care. I thought it was neat. I underlined it everywhere. Okay. So verse 6, it says, I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you, and I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give you to you, your offspring after you, the land of your sojournings, all of the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Okay, so how many times did God say I will? 5? Okay. 5, yeah. Okay, so God's like, I will. And like, if I say, I will take the trash out in a minute, you know, I'm going to quick over there, pick up those pizza boxes and take the trash out. But then I start talking to everybody. By the time I get to like the 7th person, one of you might start to realize it may not happen, okay? I've forgotten, it's gone. But God's like he swears by himself. He says these things. If he says he will, he can't lie. He's not a man that he should lie. So he's saying, I will, I will, I will, I will. He says it a bunch of times because, like, perchance, he will. Anyway, I think that's really neat. Did anybody have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
And what did he ask Abraham to do before that?
He says,
He didn't ask anything of him, did he?
not really, just walk before me.
Yeah. I'll do this.
What he already knows he's supposed to be doing.
It's like, trust me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like your requirements.
Yeah.
It's really weird because if you think about Christianity as a whole, like we always think our requirements are like die to self, put down the old man. Like we're just like, man, this is insane. But it's like our requirements are really just like that, and God's requirements are like like God-sized requirements, and ours are like actually pretty manageable for us if we can like get it together. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say
Walking away from my thingy because Jordan talked about it.
cool that he says no longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. Like at that point, he's like, I don't really care what you want anymore. This
Yeah.
is happening now. It's like it's too, you are now. So even if Abraham like jumped off the deep end, because it kind of sounds like up here that he was backsliding. When
Mm-hmm.
God talked to him, he was like, I need you to do this because I'm ready to make this covenant happen.
Yeah.
And now he's like, yep, it's too late now. You are now the father of nations. When God says it, that's it. There's no going back. So I just think that's cool.
Yeah. Okay, so I just randomly thought about. So he said, like, I'll make you the father of nations. And now he's saying, you are the father of nations.
Right.
I have made
There's
you.
like no nations.
There's
yeah,
just
that's
Ishmael.
cool, yeah.
So it's like, I mean, technically.
Yeah.
He also was talking about
It's
these
like a rancid
unfortunate
nation.
nations. Okay, Piper, go ahead.
What does the walking before God mean?
So how do you, like, keep yourself pure, if that makes sense? Now you're nodding. You're like,
Go
question's
forward.
over.
Go forward, trust what I tell you, don't wait for me to keep showing you everything, maybe that's the way to look at it, right? Walk before me. Right?
Walk before me, yeah.
Go do it.
Oh, you know what, Piper?
Because you said trust me.
That is a good question. I like your answer too, but that is a good question because I was just driving into Aiken and I had this great thought. Clearly it was me. Never thought about it before. But like when you get to, hey, you just got your license. You really do know this. Okay, when you get to these like 4-way stops and there's like a light. Let's pretend there's a light at 4-way stops usually. Anyway, so there's a light and it says it's red. There's this thing called taking control of the intersection where I could because it's turning, it's yellow, I could technically, I'm going to turn left, I'm just going to pull into it. And that way when it turns red, all the traffic will stop and I can just turn. Okay? We'll not comment on the legality of these things, okay? Not great. Anyway, so I was coming up to the red light, but it was like a turn. I really wanted to make the turn. But I was like, it's about to be red. I'm not going to do it, right? I'm just going to stop. And then I see these other cars. Immediately, as soon as their light turned green, they were gone. I was like, this was a good thing that I didn't do this dumb idea I had. But, so what your question is, I was thinking about, I don't know, it just came to my mind that like they saw their light was green, and so they went. Regardless of what I was thinking in my little sphere, my tinfoil box that I think I'm protected in, they were just doing what they know they're supposed to be doing. Their light turned green, so they went. My light turned red, so I need to stop. Sometimes I think I get it personally confused. I feel like this whole thing is for me, but anyway. I feel like I get it confused when God shows me something that I'm supposed to be doing. And then, like, I'm just looking over at that person, just like, wait a second. Julia isn't moving. What is she doing? Like, no, that's Julia's red light. I have a green light. I'm supposed to keep going. It's not necessarily that, and if Julia looked over at me and was like, man, why isn't she going? And I had a red light and she's going to keep going, it wouldn't make sense either because we'd cause a traffic accident. Don't do that. But I don't know if any of that makes sense. Someone nod if it did. Okay. Yes, good. One person got it. That's all I need. The rest of you stink. Anyway. Yeah, red light, green light. Like, this is your stopping point. This is their going point. Sometimes it's the same and it's great, but sometimes that's it. So, like, walking before the Lord. I think last year I had somebody who will remain nameless ask me, like, a lot of times, like, how do you know if you're supposed to keep going or not keep going with something? And I think it's kind of interesting if you put it in that red light, green light perspective. If God hasn't put that stop sign up and told you, hey, stop doing this, maybe sometimes God's quiet and he's telling you to just keep doing what I already told you what to do. So just go do that until I tell you to stop, and then you stop. The cup will be full, and then we move on. Okay. Does that make sense to anybody? Yay. Okay. I'm so impressed because I somehow answered your question without meaning to answer it in like 2 seconds, and then no, we had to keep talking. We have more time to fill, Piper. Okay. Does anybody remember what verse we stopped on? On 8? Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's right, because we counted all the I wills.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. All right. So 9 to 14. And this is God just talking about, not necessarily. I wrote our part of the agreement, but this is kind of just what God was talking to Abraham about. Which the reason I wrote that was because I just think it's funny that God was like, and God said to him, as for you, I think that's neat. Like, I will do all of this stuff. I will. And as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you, throughout their generations. And this is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you, and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins. And it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male throughout your generations, whether born in your house or bought with your money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring. Both he who is born of your house and he who is bought with your money, because our money does have something to do with us, shall surely be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh, an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskins shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. I do think that was kind of neat that it says he has broken my covenant, not Abraham. Like that one guy, that guy broke the covenant. Abraham is still, the promise is still in effect. It doesn't matter for the rest of them. Okay. I tentatively ask if anyone had any questions during this portion.
Well, this is the part we go back to.
Okay.
But there is no 10 Commandments yet. There is no Jewish religion. There are no, here's what you're supposed to do to follow me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he's just asking him to trust him, and he's going to continue to talk to him. Because it's like, otherwise, how do people know what to do? How do people know what to do is right? Because, there's no discussion about what's written down as laws or rules or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that it's like, I'm gonna lead you back to that, or I'm gonna lead you, but you're gonna follow me or whatever. It's just kind of interesting. It's like, so how do they know what to do? Keep my covenant. What am I supposed to do?
All right.
Like at this point,
Just be circumcised.
Right now.
Yeah.
yeah, and do what I said. But in this case, like it's like he gives them direction to
Mm-hmm.
do things. I don't know. It's kind of interesting because you kind of like at this point, it's like, okay, what's the deal? What do we have to do? What do we have to do? What's going on? What are the rules?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I always wondered why that? Why circumcision? Is there some kind of symbolic behind it?
I've heard a lot of people say there was like it was like a cleanliness thing, but I don't know.
I would
That would-
definitely say cleanliness.
From a male perspective, it's a pretty personal thing.
Thank you, Jen. It's a very personal thing.
Because like the same thing about when the Jews went into the valley, when they actually escaped from Egypt and everything, it was a way for them to stand out as God's people, right? Everything about what they did, the reason a lot of their rules of why you don't eat these things, all that was meant to be, you're going to be different than the rest of those people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Clean, holy, respect, all that stuff. And so maybe this is like the beginning of that as a way of marking someone,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that they're your God's people.
Yep.
Right, you don't have to do it as a part of following God, right? It's not
Yeah.
God's commandment. It could still be something
They
you
still
do.
do it though.
Yeah.
It's kinda like
But yeah.
medically.
Did you have anything else?
The servant, like the servants had to be circumcised too.
Mm-hmm.
Does that just like what if they were like an adult or something?
An adult? Well.
Yeah.
So really funny.
Somewhere it says that they do.
Yeah.
Really funny that you should say that, because I, for some silly reason, never really realized how old Abraham would have been when he was circumcised. But he was pretty old. So yeah, everybody.
Yeah.
And at least you could like stand on that and be like, listen, I know you're not 8 days old, but I was 99, so whatever. Anyway. Is that it? Wait, one more. Okay.
Have a comment. I read something, and I obviously need to do research on it, but I thought it was pretty cool. And it says, ever wonder why God told Abraham to wait 8 days? Well, the body begins to produce vitamin K on the 8th day, and that vitamin is responsible to promote blood clotting. So one of the first things doctors do today is they'll give a newborn like a vitamin K shot. So that's pretty cool that like God already knew that like that 8th day
Yeah.
that our body will start producing that vitamin.
He's like, so you don't die. Wait 8 days.
Almost like God knew his creation, right?
That's right. I just thought it was cool.
That is cool. I like that. I like that positive note on circumcision from Miss Jen. Listen, the reason I said tentatively was because I was like, Piper, please know what this is. Don't ask me to, to detailedly describe it. I was going to make someone else do it. I really was, guys. I didn't even care. Shameless.
I just wonder, how do they know who to go to do this?
To be circumcised?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, at that time, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
way back then.
Yeah, I mean, back to your point, can you imagine Abraham going to someone and say, hey, this is what I need you to do?
Oh, you want me to do
Because at
what?
this point, we don't even know how big his group is, really, right?
Kinda big.
His wife,
Yeah.
but we don't
Yeah.
know the numbers and all that. And is it just for the future generations, or, and everybody comes in after, or is it everybody now? Well, no. because
Well,
he-
no.
He does Ishmael, so it's
Mhm.
everybody.
Yeah.
And it does go on to say that everybody in his household
Yep.
was
Yep.
circumcised.
Yep.
So all the questions that you all had, I'm sure Abraham had. He was like, whoa, 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 Lord. But God said, walk before me. So he was just like, okay, I see a green light, and I'm going to walk before you. Hobble for a day or two, but I'm going to walk. Okay. Guys, what verse did we stop on again? We went to 14. Okay. Isaac's birth is promised. Okay, so in verse 15, it says, and God said to Abraham, as for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of people shall come from her. Okay, I'm just going to pause right there. God said, kings of people shall come from her. Nations are going to come from her. Like, I will. And from her. As if there was a time that maybe it wasn't very obvious whether it was going to be her specifically. Which I'm saying that because, like, of the whole Hagar thing. Like,
Right, yeah.
it's obviously Abraham, but maybe it's not Sarai. No, God's like, to be clear, since I obviously wasn't clear enough for you, it will be Sarai. Anyway, then in verse 17, it says, then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Okay, I never noticed this before, guys, but I'm going to keep reading, and hopefully one of you will notice it. Okay, shall Sarah, quickly, like, switches names. That was fast. Like, just instantly, got to call my wife a different name. Who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. And God said, no, but Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. Okay, did anybody notice something like slightly? Okay, did anybody notice anything in there? Those like few verses I read. 17 through 19.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Well, honestly,
Like, really, God?
was he asking for favor for Ishmael?
Yeah. okay, I'll stop everybody because Terry wins. I never noticed that. Like, he was asking for a favor.
You said, did you notice something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I put that in your
Yeah,
brain.
like-
Think about it. He's like, how did he word it? Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. Okay, so I just read that and was like, wait, Ishmael's not dead. Ishmael's not wandering the forest at this point. Ishmael's in camp. He's probably in the tent next to his. And he's just like, Sarah's 90 years old. Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. It's like, just ignore that. Promise God, even though you just said it. Like, if only this, not mistake, but thing that happened that wasn't necessarily in your will, we'll say permissive will, would just be good enough for you in this moment. And it's like,
What does that even mean, though, live before you? I mean,
Yeah.
I've never read that and questioned it at all. What does, that he might live before you?
Yeah, that's
Jordan.
what
talk loud.
You think it might mean like, because it says he's gonna be like a wild donkey or whatever and be against everyone. I'm sure he's like that from the time he was born to forever. Maybe he means like that he would walk before you and like live for you. You know?
Mm-hmm.
But they wouldn't have any idea that God told Hagar that that's what the child would
Right,
be.
but they can probably look at
But they
him.
basically-
Look at that wild heathen.
They could probably look at him. But back to the pillow talk thing. That was technically his wife, too. Who knows what she disclosed.
But, so, and, you know, might be reading more into it, than is meant to be there, unless this was one of the points, but it's like,
Okay.
by giving them new names, right, even though they've screwed up,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, you know, Jesus giving us a second chance with the
Refresh,
Holy
yeah.
Spirit, right? So
Mhm.
it's like the whole thing is kind of a setup that, you know, hey, here they are, they still made mistakes, and God's renaming them and giving them another chance, just like Jesus dying on the cross did for us. And, you know, you accept that, you move forward with it, and the whole world is yours kind of thing.
Yeah.
His whole world is yours. It's almost like that's setting this up.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, honestly, at this point, why the guy's just like, okay, I'm gonna go look for two more.
Try again.
They
No,
both
right?
have- they both have screwed it up, you know.
But he renamed them like it was all better.
Yeah.
Like it's a new start.
Abraham laughs at him.
And then Abraham laughs at him. Yeah. After all this, I will.
Yeah, right.
Okay, does anybody know what Isaac means? Yes.
He laughs.
He laughs.
It
Okay.
says that in my Bible.
It says it in mine too, but anyway. Or laughter. I don't know, I Googled it once and it said Isaac just meant laughter. Okay. I just think that's funny, but only because I always thought it was like laughter talking about, for some reason, I thought it was talking about Sarah laughing at God. And then I thought it was about like Abraham laughing at God. And then I like read the placement of the story and it's just like, no, that's not going to happen, says God. Like he's literally like, no, comma. But Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. And it's like, do you think maybe God was laughing at that point? I don't know. I just think it's funny. Yeah, exactly. He's like, no, we're not doing all that. Forget it. That's behind us now. We're moving forward, pressing on to what lies ahead. Like, okay. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. It's almost like it's Ishmael's name. He hears, okay? I have heard you. God is kind of sarcastic sometimes, guys. I think like some of these names are like a little sarcastic. Okay, as for Ishmael. How did I lose my place? Okay, 20. Thank you, guys. I trust you guys. I was going to say I don't trust you. I do trust you guys. Sorry, Parker. Sorry, Brandon. I just read from my Bible because that way it continuously goes. Anyway, as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly. He shall father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. Okay, just everybody's reminder that the word great does not necessarily mean good, okay? It just means big and mighty, okay? But I will establish my covenant with Isaac. Like, but I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear you at this time next year. It's like all this emphasis God's got for you. Like, in case there's any question, no more questions. Because maybe he's a little, not worried because God knows what's going to happen, but maybe, just so we're clear, no more frolicking about trying to figure out how to do this and how to take responsibility for something that I said I'm responsible for. It's going to be Sarah. It's going to be Isaac. It's going to be next year. Okay, here's your time frame. Please stop worrying about it. I think God's kind of sweet when he is just like, okay, deep breath, everybody. This is it. Okay. And when he had finished talking with him, God went up from Abraham. Then Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all those born in his house or bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and he circumcised. Well, it says he circumcised, so I think Abraham did it.
Oh, so
It was
Abraham did it.
his
all
personal
himself.
job. I'm sure. They do lots of like butcherings and things like that. They had all kinds of tools,
Oh,
I'm sure.
so he
Anyway.
had it.
And he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very day. So everybody on one day. That's what I'm getting from that.
Yeah.
Which, if you remember, the vastness of his like group was now so big that him and Lot had to separate.
Right.
So it's not like this was like 20 people. Okay, this was like a full day job. I don't know if he was like teaching everybody, but it does just say he did it. So then I don't know if they just stood in a very shaky line. I don't know. Okay, so then it says, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very day, as God had said to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And then God said this time next year, so that would have made him more like 14 when his brother was born. But anyway, that very day, and his son Ishmael was circumcised, and all the men of his house, those born in the house, and those bought with money from a foreigner, were circumcised with him. Okay, so just note, nowhere in God's command to be circumcised does it say, like, chase him down, tie him up, do it, anything like that. It just says in verse 14 of chapter 17, any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. You're separated, and that's all there is to it. So I don't actually think everybody was like just being forced to do this. I think it was just made super clear, this is how it's going to be. You can stay or you can go. But you're not bringing any curses on my household. So, and then it says every one of them was, which I think by itself, anytime you see in the Bible where it says, and everybody, just know that's like a miracle by itself. Because like, I'm pretty sure everybody in here believes really similarly. But if you said everybody agreed, it's like, wait a second. That's all by itself a miracle, because everybody has very different opinions and takes and perspectives and experiences. So everybody in his household was circumcised. And I think that's all by itself a miracle, because they all agreed and nobody wanted to break God's covenant.
Something else I never thought of though. How did everybody in his household, because obviously it was vast, at this point in time, they all have faith in God? And that's something I've never thought of.
Yeah, that's what I was going back to. There's no organized religion or anything, but they do know they're following him, Abraham, because at this point he's been pretty successful, right? Or is that
Yeah.
later? Yeah.
Right.
And it's because he's following what God tells him to do. And so, I guess when they got no other reference point, so this guy right here seems to have it going
All
on.
those people just acted on faith.
Yeah.
At least God spoke to Abraham.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But did he speak to all these? That's interesting.
But the Bible says that they didn't have to see to be blessed. Like they just had to believe. So isn't that cool? Like they were all
The fact that they believe,
out there.
Like you said, it's like, what are we even believing at this point?
Right.
Because they're really,
Yeah, because they didn't see, couldn't
what
see
exactly are
anything.
we believing?
Right. And that might be like some of the stuff that's like, you know, the scholars have looked at and, you know, whatever history there is, you know, that aligns with the Bible and everything. Maybe there's more to the story or something. I don't know.
maybe, but
But yeah, it comes up. Things come up later in the Bible that kind of reference back to kind of fill in some of these gaps. So it's a lot to put together.
I saw this really cool graph. I don't know if I've ever actually, I feel like Jason showed it once here, but it was a really neat graph, and it was showing that like throughout the Bible, the entire Bible references itself like over 60,000 times or something, and it's just like all crazy, and I think that's neat because,
Accordions or whatever.
well, yeah, basically.
I had a probably got one, cause he told
Okay.
me, he asked me where I got it from, and I told him where I got it from.
Okay.
And it showed all of the lineage. It was like unbelievable. I was like,
It's actually in my Bible, like
Yeah.
on the side, if there's a verse here, it shows like verse 2 or whatever.
Mhm.
It shows all the references, New Testament, Old Testament.
Yeah.
What was said in that verse.
That's cool.
We got that big book
Mhm.
with the big pull-out thing,
yeah,
14, 16 feet long.
yeah.
I'll bring that up here one night, kind
There
of
you
lay it
go.
out and look at it, you know, and kind of.
Just like really look at where all the connections are.
Yeah.
When we're talking about everybody like just believing on faith without seeing, I think it's like really neat that like I don't know, the reason I mentioned when Hagar specifically said like now I've seen this person who's looked after me is just because I think it's really like I say it again, I think it's really neat that this random Egyptian woman who's just a servant in a household like was just like, oh, this is actually God, which kind of should just show you that his whole household, while some of them might have been related to him, clearly were not like all just believing everything he believed. They were just like, I mean, he's the boss, man. We just follow him.
Well, and then that's another part of all the Egyptians that were like, okay, we'll be circumcised.
Yeah, because they believed.
It does also say that if they're not, they'll be cut off. So it could have also been a majority of them believed. There could have been some that just said, okay, I'm no longer in the household.
Mm-hmm.
Possibility. Because it does talk about they will not be a part of the household.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is kind of like wrong part. Okay, kind of a little crazy when you think about it, because like,
I know. I'm gonna do this, or I'm not gonna be part of the family. Huh.
or I'm out, or that's it.
But it said everyone was, right? So it's like none of them opted to leave,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, but they don't say
Everyone in
who
his house.
everyone was
and all the men of his house.
Everyone.
of his house, but nobody else, just
And
of
this-
his house.
Well, that's his household.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
this,
okay.
Yes.
Did Hagar go to heaven? Like, do you, do you know if, like, Hagar went to heaven because she said that she believed in God?
I think she did, but I don't know if she did, because I don't know who God lets in heaven unless I don't know people's hearts like that.
I didn't know if
Yeah.
it said in the Bible somewhere about if,
Uh,
like, any of the, like, if any of the people that, like, were in his house
mhm,
that weren't, like, his descendants
mhm.
does the Old
that went to
Testament
heaven.
talk to it?
It doesn't
I didn't think it talked to it very much.
Just consider when the scripture says, and it was accounted to him as righteousness or his faith. I mean, that's one of those mysteries we don't know.
Yeah.
And this is, you know, right now, this is the point in the history of the world where essentially you only have that small conglomeration of people in the Middle East that is split off from Noah's descendants, right? So, you know, you don't have, there's nobody, there's no Aztecs, there's no, you know, there's no Asians. It's, the world is concentrated in this whatever size area. Because this is before Sodom and Gomorrah and all that stuff, right? Babel, right? Babel.
Yeah.
So this is very early on. And the whole conversation man, about
Mhm.
this, what did they believe, goes back, makes me think back. In the story of Adam and Eve, what did God ask of them? Is there any talk that God asked them to worship him initially? He basically, the only rule, hey, I built this for you guys, go enjoy it, do all these wonderful, all this stuff, then
Mhm.
Just
Don't
don't
eat
eat
of
that,
it.
you know, and
And she done it.
but there was no religious setup. There was no covenant of promise or anything. It was just, I built this wonderful thing for you and my image. I want you to have it. You know. I think it's just kind of interesting because, like, it's like, what were the rules? Well, then there was only two rules.
Well, if you're looking for rules, like there's different parts. I like that the Bible's written for everybody. We have to tie it up, guys, because like I can already tell Jason's about to call Brandon. Anyway, okay, cut her off. End this thing. Okay, but just closing point to your words. I like that the Bible is written to everybody. So if you ever meet somebody who's like, man, why didn't God just like make us do everything His way and blah 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 blah, like little robots, like just flip to the Old Testament, look through Leviticus for a little bit. There's a reason He gave up on that. And if it's like, well, why does God have so many rules? Why isn't there just one good rule? Like, okay, we'll go to the beginning of Genesis, and you'll see that there was just like one rule. We didn't do well with that either.
We couldn't even do that right.
Exactly. So it's like it's just written to different people, and I think that's neat. Anyway, let's close out in prayer.
Okay.
Okay. I said prayer very sarcastically. Okay, actual prayer, guys. All right. God, thank you so much for everything that we learned tonight. God, just help it to stick in our hearts, and I don't know, maybe salivate us a little bit till Sunday. God, your word does not return void, so any scriptures that we heard that we just didn't quite understand in the moment, God, just help us to like ponder and think on those things and dwell on those things that are good and pure and holy and true in you. And help us each to have a good night this evening and a good rest of the week. And God, a safe drive home. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.